Taking a local business across a national border represents the most dangerous strategic decision a multinational firm will ever make. Companies usually choose between three distinct levels of capital commitment. They can load a standardized product onto a low-cost export container, sign a $3 million licensing deal to rent out their brand, or spend billions building a fully operational manufacturing facility from scratch. The choice between these three modes has nothing to do with geographic distance. An executive team sitting in Chicago evaluating markets in Toronto and Tokyo will make their decision based on a rigid calculation: how much operational control they need versus how much capital they are willing to risk. This calculation is governed by two unyielding theoretical frameworks: the OLI paradigm and transaction cost theory. Together, these frameworks function like the laws of physics for international business. If a company attempts an expansion without accurately pricing in the geopolitical volatility and cultural friction of the target country, these forces will strip away their capital. To understand exactly how this works, we have to map out the theoretical matrix that dictates global expansion and test it against the historical data of Pepsi, Apple, Walmart, and Toyota. Internationalization is an optimization of vulnerability. Every degree of control a company demands over its foreign operations costs exponentially more capital upfront. This diagram illustrates the OLI paradigm, the three advantages a firm must coordinate to succeed abroad. The first is ownership. A firm needs proprietary assets, like highly specific patents, unique manufacturing technologies, or immense brand power, to overcome the inherent disadvantages of being a foreigner. The second pillar is location. A company must identify clear geographic pull factors in the target country, whether that is a massive demographic market size, exceptionally cheap labor, or highly favorable tax incentives. The final pillar is internalization. This is a measure of financial efficiency. A firm must calculate whether it is more profitable to manage its own advantages directly or to rent them out to a local third party. This calculation introduces our second framework, transaction cost theory, or TCT. TCT hinges on asset specificity, a measurement of how complex, rigid, and unique a company's technology or operational process actually is. Economist Oliver Williamson established a core rule of TCT. When a company with highly specific assets tries to operate in a foreign market with an unpredictable legal and cultural environment, the cost of searching for, negotiating with, and constantly monitoring outside partners skyrockets. This friction destroys the financial benefit of cheap outsourcing. To prevent local partners from stealing intellectual property or compromising quality, the company is forced to spend massive amounts of capital to build and manage its own facilities. This leads to the productivity sorting theory. Building operations from the dirt up, known as a greenfield investment, generates maximum friction. Only the most productive, highly capitalized entities in the world can survive the sheer cost of doing it. Mid-tier firms lack that level of capital, so they step down the ladder to joint ventures. The lowest productivity firms cannot afford overseas operations at all and must rely entirely on standard exporting. A firm's entry mode is directly dictated by its internal productivity and the specific vulnerability of its core assets. Exporting offers a company the highest flexibility while putting almost zero capital at risk. However, the strategy instantly collapses if the target country lacks a freely convertible currency. The systemic workaround for a broken financial market is countertrade. To see the extremes of this strategy, we look at the historical baseline: PepsiCo's 1972 entry into the Soviet Union. Soviet law strictly prohibited taking rubles out of the country, so Pepsi established a pure barter scheme. They shipped soft drink concentrate to the USSR and in exchange received the exclusive U.S. distribution rights for Stolichnaya vodka. The system worked until American demand for vodka reached a ceiling, while Soviet demand for Pepsi continued to climb. To settle the mounting multi-billion-dollar debt, the USSR began paying Pepsi in military hardware, handing over a fleet that included 17 diesel submarines. Then came the ex-post systemic failure. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Pepsi's highly integrated supply chain shattered overnight. Their bottling plants were suddenly located in Belarus, while the shipyards they relied on were trapped in a newly independent Ukraine. This same vulnerability exists today. In 2017, the Indonesian government attempted to purchase 11 Sukhoi Su-35 fighter jets from Russia in a deal valued at $1.14 billion. By law, Indonesia enforced a counter-purchase mandate. They required Russia to accept 50% of the jet's value in the form of physical plantation commodities, specifically rubber and crude palm oil. The deal was heavily negotiated, but it failed upon exposure to ex-post geopolitical realities. The United States threatened secondary economic sanctions against Indonesia through the CAATSA Act, forcing Jakarta to abandon the Russian deal entirely. Exporting and countertrade are highly effective at protecting a corporation's upfront capital, but they leave the entire operation exposed to sudden, uncontrollable shifts in global geopolitics.
Between simple exports and massive direct investments lie contractual modes. These allow a firm to exploit the specific local advantages of a foreign partner without deploying their own capital. In the late 1970s, Walt Disney Productions faced severe domestic capital constraints. When approaching the Japanese market for Tokyo Disneyland, they opted for a 100% licensing model with the Oriental Land Company. The financial asymmetry of the contract was staggering. Disney invested a mere $3 million. They forced their Japanese partner to absorb the entire $1.4 billion construction cost, effectively pushing the entire financial risk of the theme park off their own balance sheet. In exchange for providing the intellectual property, Disney extracted a guaranteed, risk-free royalty stream of 10% on ticket sales and 5% on food, regardless of whether the park turned a profit. They enforced absolute operational control through rigid compliance manuals. A similar dynamic exists in contract manufacturing. Apple hands over the physical production of its devices to Foxconn in China, specifically to avoid the massive capital expenditure of owning fixed factory assets. Apple leverages a massive location advantage. China offers an integrated industrial cluster and labor depth that is mathematically impossible to replicate elsewhere. Apple estimated it would take 9 months to recruit 8,700 industrial engineers in the US. In China, it took 15 days. But transaction cost theory dictates a blowback. Apple's massive power asymmetry consistently crushes Foxconn's profit margins. Foxconn pushed that pressure down onto scale workforce, resulting in extreme labor exploitation and catastrophic global PR damage for Apple throughout 2010. This risk transfer also appears in turnkey projects, like the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail. In these models, foreign contractors are hired to design, build, and deliver a fully operational system, transferring a completed facility to the local buyer. Turnkey megaprojects face intense risks of cost overruns and land acquisition delays. To survive, contractors are forced to forge deep politico-economic alliances with local bureaucracies to secure state financial guarantees. Contractual modes successfully shield a company's balance sheet, but the exact amount of financial risk they save is transferred directly onto their operational reputation and their dependence on local politics. When a firm's technology or operational culture reaches a peak level of specificity, TCT dictates they can no longer rely on contracts. They must execute foreign direct investment, or FDI, demanding total ownership. This forces a final structural dilemma. To achieve that ownership, does the firm acquire an existing local company to save time, or do they build a brand new facility from the dirt up? In the late 1990s, Walmart chose the acquisition route. They purchased 95 existing stores in Germany to instantly capture 19% of the national hypermarket share. The acquisition triggered a multi-dimensional failure. Walmart attempted to port its core domestic strategy, everyday low pricing, into Germany. The German cartel office immediately outlawed the practice as illegal predatory pricing. The cultural friction was just as severe. German consumers explicitly rejected the forced friendliness of Walmart baggers. Internally, Walmart's strict anti-union policies directly violated German co-determination laws, triggering massive labor strikes. After absorbing a $1 billion loss, Walmart retreated completely. They proved that massive capital reserves cannot override deep-seated local legal and cultural frameworks. We can contrast this with Toyota's greenfield investment in Karawang, Indonesia. Instead of buying a local factory, Toyota built a world-class manufacturing ecosystem completely from scratch. Toyota chose greenfield because of their asset specificity. The Toyota production system relies on intense quality control and just-in-time logistics.
It was mathematically impossible to retrofit an old, culturally entrenched local factory to meet those rigid standards. Acquiring existing operations means inheriting existing inefficiencies. When a firm's competitive advantage relies on absolute precision, only greenfield FDI can minimize long-term transaction costs. This matrix maps the synthesis of the OLI paradigm and transaction cost theory. It reveals these entry modes are not isolated choices. They form a sequential staircase. This is the hybrid sequencing play. Firms should never leap straight to massive direct investment in unknown territory. Operations should start at the bottom, using low-risk exports or licensing deals to cheaply acquire localized market intelligence. Once market depth is proven and the cultural friction is accurately mapped out, the firm can escalate their commitment, stepping up to joint ventures or contract manufacturing. The final step to a massive greenfield investment is executed only when the long-term transaction costs of outsourcing finally outweigh the capital risks of building. Pepsi lost a fleet of submarines, Sukhoi lost a $1 billion deal, and Walmart lost $1 billion in cash, because pure capital supremacy is entirely neutralized if a firm fails to price in geopolitical volatility and rigid local laws. Mastering international business requires the rigorous mathematical art of predicting and pricing friction.